In a remote Hmong village nestled deep in the mist-shrouded mountains of Laos, Tswv was a man whose name was only spoken in whispers. His mastery of necromancy and black magic set him apart, marking him as someone both feared and shunned. But what made him truly terrifying was his ability to shape-shift, a forbidden art that allowed him to become a tiger, a creature of pure ferocity and power. This dark magic was his secret, known only to his closest kin, and it was a secret that would one day plunge the entire village into a nightmare. The transformation was not without risk. Each time Tswv shifted into the form of a tiger, he relied on his brother to bring him back. The ritual was simple yet perilous. Tswv would place a woven basket studded with knives on his head, and upon returning from his hunt, his brother was tasked with knocking the basket off to restore him to his human form. But the day came when this ritual would go horribly wrong, forever altering the fate of the village. It was a moonless night, the kind where the darkness seemed to swallow the world whole. The air was thick with tension as Tswv prepared for his transformation. His brother stood by, his heart pounding with a sense of foreboding. Tswv's eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, held a glimmer of something darker, something that made his brother's skin crawl. Tswv placed the basket on his head, and with a guttural chant, his body began to contort and shift. In a matter of moments, where the man once stood, a massive tiger now prowled, its fur bristling and its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Without a word, the tiger bounded into the jungle, leaving his brother to wait in agonizing anticipation. Hours passed, and the jungle was eerily silent. Then, at the edge of the village, the tiger emerged from the shadows, but something was horribly amiss. Clenched in its powerful jaws was not the expected game, but a severed human limb, still dripping with fresh blood. The sight of it filled Tswv's brother with a paralyzing dread. His worst fears had been realized. Tswv had crossed an unholy line, taking a human life. Terrified, his brother faltered, his hands shaking as he struggled to summon the courage to knock the basket from the tiger's head. But in that crucial moment, fear overcame him, and he failed to perform the ritual. The basket remained on the tiger's head, and Tswv remained trapped in his beastly form, his humanity slipping away forever. As the days turned into weeks, the village was plunged into a nightmare. The tiger, now known as Xyas, began to haunt the edges of the village, its presence a constant, oppressive shadow. The villagers lived in terror, for Xyas was no ordinary beast, he had retained his human cunning, and his hunger had grown insatiable. But Tswv's terror did not end with the hunt. The cursed tiger began to prey on the most skilled and talented villagers, those whose abilities could be twisted to serve his dark purposes. One by one, the village's best craftsmen, hunters, and shamans began to disappear without a trace. It was said that Tswv would creep into the village under the cover of night, his eyes gleaming in the darkness, and snatch his victims before they could even scream. These were not mere killings. The unfortunate souls Tswv took were never seen again, at least, not in their human forms. Rumors spread that Tswv was building an army, a legion of cursed tigers like himself, each one a twisted mockery of the person they had once been. The villagers began to find claw marks on trees near their homes, and sometimes, they heard the distant, bone-chilling roars of these beasts echoing through the night. One evening, as the village gathered around a dying fire, a young shaman stepped forward. He was known for his wisdom and bravery, and he had a plan to confront the monster. The shaman proposed to venture into the jungle, armed with talismans and ancient spells, to seek out Tswv and free those who had been taken. The villagers, desperate and afraid, pinned their hopes on him. But the shaman never returned. Days later, the villagers found his broken, bloodied body at the edge of the jungle, his eyes wide open in terror. His throat had been torn out, and beside him, written in the dirt with his own blood, were the words, "He cannot be stopped." From that day forward, the village was gripped by despair. They knew they were powerless against Tswv and his growing army of cursed tigers. The jungle became a place of dread, its once familiar paths now tainted by the stench of death and the whispers of lost souls. Tswv's reign of terror stretched on for decades. From the early 1800s until the 1960s, his name became synonymous with death. Even speaking it aloud was believed to bring bad omens, and many who dared to utter it met untimely ends. The villagers became prisoners in their own homes, too terrified to venture out after dark. As the Vietnam War raged, rumors began to spread that Tswv had met his end in the chaos, but the truth remained uncertain. Some believed he had simply moved on to new hunting grounds, seeking out fresh prey in the war-torn jungles. Others whispered that his descendants still lived on, hidden deep in the remote regions of Vietnam and Laos, waiting for the day when they would rise again. Even today, the legend of Tswv lingers like a dark shadow over the Hmong people. Those who live near the old village claim that on certain nights, when the moon is hidden and the wind howls through the trees, they can still hear the distant roars of the cursed tigers, and the faint, echoing cries of the villagers who were taken. And so, the fear of Tswv endures, a chilling reminder of the darkness that once walked among them, and the price of dabbling in forbidden magic.